that's for me, living life so merrily. It's so easy, can't you see? Polka, polka, that's for me. Polka, polka, everyone come along, it's lots of fun.
Welcome back, Miguel Dorati here at the Talk and Shoot podcast, and co-host Mike Davis is here with me, and we're joined by frequent guest Dave Sidursky, which means our theme is boxing. Dave, how you doing?
I'm good. How you guys doing this morning?
Real good.
Fantastic,
Mike,
man.
And Mike's there too, the co-host. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, real good, man. Real good. A little early, but we're going to knock this thing out.
Yep. Anyway, because we are talking about boxing here, we're going to go ahead and continue one of the series that we've had Dave join us for on a couple of occasions already, and that's the greatest boxer of all time. It started out with a free discussion, basically, between us and a friend of ours who hasn't been able to make it recently is Keith Palmer. And we were just throwing around names. You know, we probably bounced around 30 names of people who, you know, maybe merit consideration to be the greatest boxer of all time. At some point, though, the discussion, you know, really becomes moot because it's an ongoing discussion. You know, you're always going to have different opinions and different conclusions. And that's where Dave came in. And Dave brought along with him a little bit of a computer program that he's gonna give us some info on, but and it runs a simulation that gives you like a pound for pound setting so that you know the weight differences are balanced out, and the results have been absolutely fascinating. Why don't we go through the 16-man results here just to get people caught up. You want to read the little guys, just the results, basically? Dave, you want to get into that?
Sure. Okay. Little guys. Willie Pep won a convincing unanimous decision over Tony Canzoneri. Then we have Joe Gans versus Roberto Duran. Duran won a comfortable unanimous decision over Gans. Henry Armstrong TKO Kid Chocolate in 10.
I was upset with that, by the way. I thought there was some shenanigans in the glove of Mr. Armstrong.
Blame the simulator. And Sugar Ray Robinson won a comfortable decision over Mickey Walker.
Okay, cool. Why don't you talk a little bit about the simulator since we mentioned it, and give them a little plug for us.
Sure. The program is called Title Bout. It's an electronic version of, I don't know if anybody remembers the board game back from the 70s and early 80s, but it's a more modernized version of that. It has a database of pretty much any fighter you can think of. I think there are a total of 6,600 fighters in the database from all eras, starting from guys like Yankee Sullivan to the modern day. And the website for anybody who would like to check it out, pretty simple. It's www.titleboutchampionshipboxing.com. Titlebout Championship Boxing, all one word.
And it's not like a huge amount of money. It's like a $20, $30 thing, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I paid $19.99 for it.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, we're relying on that. Mike, are you able to read us the big guy rounds before we get into the round of 8?
You know what? I don't have that in front of me.
Okay,
I
no
know
sweat.
Dave does, so.
I'll get it. I'll do this one quick here too. We had Harry Greb facing Sam Langford, and Langford won a decision there. These were very, very close decisions on this side of the bracket, which was considered the heavyweights. We had Gene Tunney facing Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali won that one. Also, not by a very wide margin, but it was Ali who advanced there. Then in the first round, we did the rematch of Archie Moore and Ezzard Charles, and it was Charles that won this outing. And as you can imagine, and as basically, those were razor sharp. I think one win over 100 simulations, one win separated the two guys. So Charles advanced there, and in the last fight, we had Joe Louis facing Rocky Marciano, and Louis scored the knockout in 10. So we had Louis, Charles, Ali, and Langford advance. And from the little guys, we had Sugar Ray Robinson, Henry Armstrong, Roberto Duran, and Willie Pep. So now in the round of 8, what we've done is we've match made those fights just to see, using the simulators setting for pound, so that the men are considered just on their skill and the weight doesn't come into play. Obviously, a bigger guy against a smaller guy with all other things more or less equal in terms of skill and stuff usually goes the way of the bigger guy. The simulator accounts for all that. You want to get into the first fight? The first fight we had made, since I'm the matchmaker, I guess.
It was Willie Pep and Sam Langford.
Willie Pep and Sam Langford. Now there is a fight for the ages. Dave, what do we see in the simulator?
Okay, here we go. Based on 100 simulations, here's the results. Pep dazzled the crowd with his defensive wizardry over the first 5 rounds as Langford had difficulty landing cleanly. In round 6, the educated left thumb of Pep found the right eye of Langford, leaving Sam virtually blinded. Pep continued to outbox the severely compromised Langford over the next 4 rounds, holding a big lead on points after 10. However, Langford refused to give up. He landed a right hand, which wobbled Pep in the 11th, and he battered him along the ropes for the remainder of the round. Pep used his legs to stay out of trouble over the next 2 rounds, while Langford relentlessly stalked. Langford landed a tremendous right, which sent Pep crashing to the canvas with 20 seconds remaining in the 14th round. Pep rose at the count of 7. Langford looked to finish, but ran out of time as the round came to a close. A badly hurt Pep stayed on his bicycle in the 15th round. With 45 seconds remaining, Langford landed a left hook that turned Pep's legs to jelly. Sam landed several unanswered punches before Pep managed to grab and desperately hold on. Langford looked for the finish, but Pep managed to hang on to the final bell. The fight went to the scorecards. Pep wins by unanimous decision. 146-140, 145-140, and 144-140 on the cards.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, first, a little bit of props to the simulator, because that text, how does that come together? Does the simulator give that to you, or was that some of your own doing?
That is my own doing. I look at the simulation results and basically formulate the most common scenario from there.
Okay. And I mean, you deserve props on that, because you put together a very realistic fight there. Now, obviously, we run a different simulation. We might have to craft a different result and stuff like that, because nothing is set in stone. But in this set, we got Willie Pep beating Sam Langford, and I find that to be a really, really interesting result. And 2 of the all-time greats, in my estimation, and I could be wrong on this, but in my estimation, I almost feel like Langford gets maybe a little more respect as being the best of all time over Willie Pep. I think Pep is in the conversation, has some followers out there that appreciate him, but I don't know that as many as Langford, although they both, elitely belong in the discussion. Mike, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I think, like you said, I think the one thing that, the one attribute that Langford has is the biggest thing he's known for, that he's never won a world title. And because of it, it's just one of those quirky boxing facts to where, although he's got an amazing record, he's, fought some amazing guys. On top of that, we're world champions like Joe Gans. But it's almost as if the biggest favor to his career was Jack Johnson refusing to fight him, because guys like you, I, and Dave, we all know him because he never won a world title, and he was real light too. I think he weighed about I think he weighed in at 143 pounds at his lightest. So I mean, he wasn't a big guy anyway. Sam was a beast, man. It's a shame he never got the strap across his waist, but at the end of the day, you can't take anything away from the guy.
Yeah, no, I think you press the button, the simulator goes a different way, and Langford could have run through this whole tournament and be the champ at the end.
I didn't really expect that result either.
So I think that's what I'm getting at, and I think kudos go to Pep, who, like I said, I think has his followers, but I don't know that he has like an elite place. Like I don't know. Like once you get down to the Final Four, if I expected Willie Pep to be there. Now, when you look at the numbers and stuff, you're again, we're talking about an all-time great and a boxer with a heroic story in there that really makes a big difference too in terms of the fondness for it. He's got a place in my heart as one of those guys, maybe to take to a World War I ditch to fight too, because, to come back in 6 months after, breaking your neck in a plane accident is not the kind of thing that any man can do, So he certainly had a lot of props for his defense and things like that, but you got to keep in mind too that he broke his neck, and that changes your fighting a little bit too. He adapted real well, and he's got one of the all-time best records, 200 plus wins and that sort of stuff. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that they beat Langford in this, but I have to say that when I opened it, that was the first result that got a wow out of me.
Yeah, like a real defensive fighter too. It's like I didn't expect him to get this far either. I'm with you.
It's interesting. It's like how does that defense add up? What does the simulator do with defense and stuff like that? Because I think, it's one of the effects in modern boxing now with guys like Mayweather and, other guys on the pound for pound that are more defensive fighters. Rigondeaux comes to mind, although, obviously Mayweather's the standard for that. But there's a premium on that, or at least that's what's considered to be the elite of boxing, is a defensive fighter first. And I'm not sure that I actually philosophically go with that. I think that goes against really what the true essence of boxing is, which is, settle this with your fists, not by evading.
By point fighting.
But anyway, so we've got Pep and a representative of almost, I know he's, obviously not a modern fighter or anything like that, but maybe because of the defense and stuff, and you could still look at tape today and be impressed by this guy's footwork. Really is pretty much really elite compared to anyone. Whitaker, any of the great masters of footwork, even modern times. Pep compares, and Pep's going to go through. We're going to see who Pep's going to fight. The next fight is Muhammad Ali against Henry Armstrong. Now, Armstrong had come to...
Wait.
Yeah. Mike, you're saying goodbye. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is really the only thing I've got to look forward to at this point in my life.
Okay.
When you hit 40, things get a little rough.
Mike, at least you have lunch to look forward to.
Right. Maybe go to the track. Sam Langford, 178 wins, 32 losses, 40 draws. A man known as the Boston Terror and the Boston Bone Crusher. With an amazing win over Joan Gans in a non-title bout and a draw with Barbados Joe Walcott, he is regarded as the greatest fighter never to win a world championship. Dead at the age of 72 and still trying to save his money for the $30,000 appearance fee requested by Jack Johnson. To you, sir, we say goodbye.
Yeah, Langford really is one of the guys. Obviously, a lot of work has been done on him. There've been great books and things like that, and a lot about him and things. And I think the win against Gans came at the age of 19. So you got a young guy, coming up who's beating a world champion who was in his prime at the time. So I think that should be mentioned as something that sets him apart. And to be fair, I think there are a couple of other guys that are in the discussion of, depending on what you're who are in the discussion for best champion or uncrowned champion of all time. But Langford definitely would get my vote, but there are others that are mentioned. But anyway, so we have advanced, my friends, and the second fight is Muhammad Ali and Henry Armstrong. And I had declared Armstrong as my potential dark horse favorite. he came through the early rounds, and what we had looked at there was, Gans and Duran, they fought, Pep and Canzoneri fought, and Robinson and Walker fought, but it was Armstrong in his fights with Kid Chocolate who was able to get 70 stoppages, making him really the definitive power puncher of this tournament, because nobody else was even close to that. I mean, some of the other guys won 45 against 47 of their opponents and things. So I elected Armstrong. Why don't we let Dave go ahead and give us this description? This one's another doozy.
Okay, we have the truculent one, Muhammad Ali versus Hammer and Hank, the three-division wonder. Armstrong started fast, pressuring Ali over the first 2 rounds. Ali landed a quick right in the third, which caught Armstrong off balance and sent him to the canvas for a count of 4. Hammer and Hank was more embarrassed than hurt. Ali started to work his jab and dominated the next 4 rounds. By the end of the 7th, Armstrong's nose was bloody. Armstrong gradually worked his way inside over the next 2 rounds, banging Ali to the body. Ali used his deft footwork and speedy combinations to carry the next 4 rounds and was comfortably ahead after 13. Armstrong rocked Ali with a hard left hook in the 14th and battered him along the ropes. Ali rallied early in the 15th. However, Armstrong found Ali again with the left hook, staggering him midway through the round. Armstrong moved in for the finish, but Ali managed to hang on. With 30 seconds remaining, Armstrong buckled Ali's knees again with a tremendous right. Ali was nearly out on his feet, but gamely fired back and managed to survive until the final bell. In the end, Ali wins by unanimous decision. 144-140, 145-140, and 144-141 on the scorecards.
Again, you get a wow out of me, and Armstrong was, as I had mentioned, one of the guys that I was keeping an eye on for this tournament, and he's gone. And there's no shame in losing to Muhammad Ali. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Ali is when you watch the videos of him with his head work, and he's in the corner with his hands on the ropes, and he's just begging you to hit him. It's real easy to just kind of disregard who he's up against, but he's doing those things against world champions. I mean, Muhammad Ali truly is a special fighter, and I had also thought that Homicide Hank would have been able to pull it off, but at this point, I think Muhammad Ali is the front runner, the number 1 seed for the rest of the tournament.
I think here's my take on it. I'll lament Hank going out, but I don't really have a problem with it because I could easily see it going that way. Again, nice job on the description because it's very realistic and down to earth, and legitimately the fight could go down that way. I mean, the way I see Hank fighting, he was a windmill. He was a guy who came forward and came at you, and I think he didn't put that much of a premium on defense, especially, when you compare the evolution of boxing from where he was to Muhammad Ali, where Muhammad Ali in the early, especially the early version of Muhammad Ali, where he was fast and had a lot of ability to move laterally and stuff like that. He was also a very good defensive fighter, and his technique and stuff, I think, is what would probably win the day here because I would toss out there that the Hammer and Hank that won the 3 titles and had the 25 knockouts in a year, at that moment in time, for that 1 year, he may still be the single greatest fighter that's ever walked around. Just at his peak, right there in that moment. But you have to consider all things, and with a simulator, they're taking into account his entire career. And I'm okay with the result because of who Muhammad Ali is. And Muhammad Ali really, he's another guy who, he may be in. If you took a poll for the entire world, who the greatest boxer of all time is, Muhammad Ali probably wins that because of fame and all the other things as well. But I think that when you look into it and you see The way he boxed, his body of work and everything, just in the ring, he deserves the mention. Now, I'm not sure we're going to put Muhammad Ali and Pep together. Let's see how this winds up. Mike, you want to say goodbye to Henry?
There we go. No, I thought that's what I'm talking about.
Hey, man, I'm just sending you softballs. Yeah, actually, it's golf balls.
Henry Armstrong, a man known as Hurricane Hank, Hammering Hank, and Homicide Hank. 150 wins, 21 losses, excuse me, and 10 draws. At a time when there were only 8 recognized weight divisions, this man held 3 belts. Held 3 belts at the same time. He's the only man that has ever been able to claim that feat. He was also KO'd in his first fight as a professional and showed everyone around him that hard work and determination can make you a world champion. Take care, sir.
Hey, one other side note on Sam Langford before I forget. You didn't mention his most famous nickname, the very controversial Boston Tar Baby. But hey, I'm ready for these discussions because it's part of the story. You mentioned that he was denied access to a world championship, and racism has a lot to do with it. And I think you can't.
You mean Jack Johnson also?
But that was for racist reasons also. But, I don't want to say reverse racism or under-describe the situation there. But that had its own politics, Yeah, I don't think it was all Johnson saying, I'm not going to fight him because he's black, or because he's good. I think it was just because, he was going to make more money in other ways. And Johnson was the guy who was I don't know what the right comparison is, like the Robin Hood there, the hero, the guy who's facing the man, you know what I mean? So why would no one's really helping Johnson that much, so what does he have to extend his hand to Langford for? I don't know, I wish we had a time machine, I could go there, but yeah, I think, Boston Tar Baby is how people remember him, and I think it bears mentioning, so sorry to get segued there.
But, it speaks volumes at the time, too, to have a fighter that is your main event, and that's the nickname you're going to put on him. It reeks of desperation on the promoter's end to try to sell tickets.
Yeah, you know what I mean, though? I think they tried to scare the public, and you have to keep in mind it's 50 years, less than 50 years when he started his career since they had freed the slaves. And, I think
the Jim Crow laws were still in effect.
I think we all grew up knowing that racism existed and knowing that it was bad. But once we're looking at it from a history aspect, that I've had the opportunity to look at it with, through the prism of boxing and stuff, it's impressive in how grotesque it is. You know what I mean? I don't know that the deaths are really taught in school and stuff, and that people realize exactly how bad things are. I just came across yesterday, it was actually one of the bigger news sites, just a remembrance. In 1906, in the New York City Zoo, they displayed an orangutan and a pygmy. Now, a pygmy is a human being, my friends. So, you know what I mean? He was in a cage, in an iron cage, and people receiving money, 40,000 people showing up in a day to come and see the spectacle. So
that's crazy.
Life was completely different, At any rate, let's not get segued too much. We're going to get into another one of those all-time brawls here. And what we've got now is we've got Ezzard Charles taking on Roberto Duran. And, if we were watching this live in a tournament, in some kind of fantasy land, I think this would be the fight I'm most excited to see on the whole show.
Yeah, I think this is the fight where, you're going to try to attend live.
Yeah, this is one that I'm going to let Dave get into here because I'm just going to close my eyes and think about it.
Okay, great. So now we have Ezzard Charles versus Roberto Duran. Duran started fast and rocked Charles with a hard right cross late in the first round. Charles backed Duran off with a wicked right uppercut in the second. He proceeded to dominate the next 3 rounds with excellent boxing and crisp, accurate counterpunching. Duran finally found the range and roughed Charles up on the inside in rounds 6 and 7. The fighters traded on the inside in rounds 8 and 9 with both landing hard, meaningful punches. By the end of the 10th, Duran was seriously swollen to the left eye. Charles took advantage of this, controlling the action with his jab and straight right hand in the 11th and 12th. Duran turned the tide with vicious body punching in the 13th. A left hook to the liver caused Charles to audibly moan. Duran savagely tore into Charles in the 14th, trapping him against the ropes and pounding him relentlessly. Duran landed an overhand right that dropped Charles to the canvas with 30 seconds remaining. The Cincinnati Cobra was badly hurt but managed to survive the round. Charles rallied down the stretch in the 15th as Duran appeared to have punched himself out. By the end of the fight, both men were exhausted as they awaited the decision. Ezra Charles wins by split decision.
Wow.
143, 141, 143, 142, and the third judge scored 143, 142 for Duran. Charles by a razor-close decision.
Now, Miguel, in your opinion, if this fight ever actually happened, do you not see Roberto Duran like being ecstatic and excited to test himself under this type of circumstance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Charles too, though. I think both guys. Well, Charles, I think, suffers from a little bit of underappreciation, I think, in terms of he has his place among historians and people place him very highly and things like that. But I do think that he's a guy that, general fans of boxing don't know anything about, and the guy who deserves a lot a lot more exposure kind of thing if we can get it to him. By beating Roberto Duran in our tournament, obviously, we're going to take him to the stratosphere in terms of exposure. And I'm just kidding around, but I think, but I think the thing is what the simulator shows me is you're talking about a guy who's capable of beating Roberto Duran, and that would be the kind of thing that could put some people, eyes and attention on him from some people, because Duran does have a respect, especially among Latin Americans and things like that, in terms of the boxing world. And he's a great fighter. It's one of those things where I'm going to give you my take, and I hope Dave wants to get into a discussion with me, because I've been wanting to have this one with a Sugar Ray Leonard fan for a long time. Honestly, I really feel that the no mas, and keep in mind, I do speak, Spanish is actually my first language, so I do have a working knowledge of, dialect and what he might mean by stuff.
In context.
And so my thinking on it and watching the fight and stuff is, yeah, he was dead, he was losing and stuff, but the no mas actually I don't think was a coward's way out, or a guy who you could still accuse of cowardice, because I think if you look at it, this has been said before too, but I honestly feel this way, is I think he was more embarrassed than anything. I think the fight was something he wasn't able to control any of the aspects of the fight. The other guy, he must have felt like he was being made fun of by Sugar Ray Leonard. And to a certain extent, he was being made fun of with the whole behavior of the stuff in there. So I really think that the no mas was like, man, I don't even want to look at this anymore. More than, I'm just so defeated that I'm going to quit. Because if he was beaten that way, I don't think he'd ever quit. And I think that's one of the things that Duran... fans of Duran and people who remember him beyond the no mas and stuff, which was, an embarrassing moment that crossed over, and everybody remembers it. But that's my take on it, So
it's unfortunate that the casual boxing fan kind of looks at that, as we mentioned, Roberto Duran. It's the first thing out of their mouth. Meanwhile, this guy's a multiple weight world champion. He's he's, as you described, Miguel, somebody you wanted to ditch with you in World War I. Not afraid to fight, not afraid to push himself. It was just too much. It was just too much weight. I don't know. I agree with you. It's a shame that he's known for that, but unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think the general interpretation among an American is no mas is he quit. He doesn't want any more. And I think let's give him a little bit of credit and look at his entire body of work. And I think you could, most people, if they really knew everything the guy did, especially his work at lightweight early in his career when he was hungry and he was a murderer, especially during those times, if you take all that into account, casting him as a quitter isn't something that you would do, and I'd seek to avoid that. But we are going to say good. Go ahead, Lloyd.
I agree. It's one moment in a 30-something year career. You have to judge the entire body of work, and you can look at just about every fighter that had a bad moment in their career. Ray Leonard, that last fiasco versus Hector Camacho. I guess my theory on No Mass, Miguel, I would agree with you. I think he was just angry and frustrated. I think the second fight was almost, to me, an extension of the first fight. I think Ray figured out, even though he lost the first fight, he figured out that he could hang in there with Duran, and that he could take his best shots. And I think by the second time they fought, Ray was just naturally bigger man, and I think he had figured Duran out.
Prepared. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
I mean, he's got 119 fights, and in those 119 fights, you're gonna have a bad day.
Exactly.
And to have that bad day, the representation for an entire body of work, I think is, I mean, not everything Picasso touched was a masterpiece either. I mean, I don't know. I agree.
But we're going to say goodbye to Roberto anyway, aren't we?
Yes, we are. At 103-16, Roberto Duran. It's a sad day in boxing history when you have to tell a man known as the Hands of Stone, no mas, when attempting to advance through this brutal boxing tournament ever put together. A man who competed in 5 different decades and won world titles in the lightweight and middleweight class. Sparring partner to Rocky Balboa, and let us not forget an amazing run at making salsa music. At this point, we have to say goodbye to this amazing warrior.
Hasta la vista, baby. It's funny.
Mexico.
Have you guys actually listened to our podcasts? Because I put a little piece of music in the front of it.
Yeah, like the polka, polka.
Yeah.
And Miguel, I actually think David and you might be the only ones listening to our podcast.
Yeah, I think we get 3 hits instantly. Palmer sneaks in there a little bit. No, actually, it's been getting a little bit of traffic, and a couple of people. I haven't gotten any real negative feedback except for about the sound, which I'm actually waiting for a couple of major improvements that I'm going to be able to hopefully pull off here shortly, just for the people out there. But in terms of the content, it's been getting good reviews, so I'm pretty pleased with it.
Content. I mean, we all know what we're talking about,
So, anyway, we just we say goodbye to Roberto Duran there, and that leaves us in the 4th fight of the tournament. And now we're going to have.
That's one fighter I'd love to meet.
Who's that? Duran.
I've never had the pleasure of meeting him. I've met Ali. I've met several greats, Ingemar Johansson, Floyd Patterson, but I've never met Duran.
Yeah, I've been in the room with him. I haven't really actually been introduced or anything like that. So, yeah, he's a spectacle. He's the kind. That's the thing, is like most of the guys nowadays. I think they when you see them out in public like that, you get an entourage, and they've got their character face on. I'd rather sneak up on him in a restaurant when he's alone and see what you get out of him. You know what I mean? But let's go ahead and advance. We got Sugar Ray Robinson and Joe Louis, and again, I mean, talk about a clash of the titans here. Dave, take it away.
Okay, here is our finale and main event. Sugar Ray Robinson versus Joe Louis. Robinson controlled the first 2 rounds, keeping the action at long range, establishing his sharp jab and superior speed. Louis turned the tide in the 3rd and 4th, working his way inside and effectively countering the Robinson jab. Robinson landed a flurry in the 5th, which stunned Louis. He dominated the 6th and 7th with blistering combinations. Louis was now suffering from a cut over his right eye. In the 8th, Louis landed a tremendous right, which sent Robinson to the canvas. A badly staggered Robinson rose at the count of 8 and somehow survived the round. Louis stalked like a hungry lion in the night, trapping Robinson against the ropes and ravaging him to the body and head. Louis continued to press the advantage in the 10th and 11th, while Robinson stayed on his bicycle, wary of the Brown Bombers' power. Both men took a breather in a slow-paced 12th. The action heated up in the 13th as both men traded big-time shots. Robinson landed a tremendous overhand right that hurt Lewis and followed up with sizzling combinations that kept him on the defensive. By the end of the 13th, Lewis was bleeding badly over the left eye. Robinson took advantage of Lewis's compromised vision, opening up with impunity in round 14. Robinson landed a vicious three-punch combination capped off by a left hook, which sent Lewis crashing to the canvas. Lewis rose at 6, but Robinson trapped him against the ropes and landed 12 unanswered punches, prompting the referee to step in and stop the fight. Robinson wins, TKO 14.
Wow.
Yeah, you get your 4th wow in a row. Again, nice job on the write-up, too. And
wait, was that a shot? You throwing shots over there?
you guys, what do you think, Mike? Because to me, I think usually once you get down to it, Muhammad Ali is probably the guy that gets the crossover vote as the number 1 guy of all time, like, worldwide kind of thing. I think once you get into boxing fans and the older timers and stuff like that, you start to lean a little more towards Sugar Ray Robinson, and he's another guy who gets almost universal acclaim as at some levels as being the best of all time.
Dave's favorite fighters too.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar Ray Robinson. Am I correct, Dave?
Yes, you are.
And you and I think the simulator's wrong in this instance. There's generally never this much action in a fight with this much hype behind it.
Oh, Mike, are you just bitter over your $100 pay-per-view the other month?
I am. I'm still angry over the money I forked
Did
over,
you?
Yes.
On an interesting side note, we'll digress. But did you see? I don't even know if it's serious or if it is. Oscar De La Hoya actually really talking about making a comeback?
You know what? I know there's Foxy Boxing out there. I mean, he wants to do the whole fishnet thing again.
That's been brought up too, and that's why it cracks me up. And I like that in terms of making fun of Oscar. Is always good by me, but that it also takes away from like my underlying question is I get that if he said, I want to fight GG, he wants to fight Golovkin is what I read, and I'm just trying to find out the level of seriousness of that. Is that real, or is he goofing? Is he on another binge and talking stupid stuff?
Well, I mean, he's made bad decisions before, as we've seen. With him dressing up as a woman, with a prostitute, I believe she was. So, I mean, this might be just one of those series of bad decisions he's making. Or he's broke.
I don't think he's broke. I think he's managed to hang on, even though he has, obviously that's...
I've heard a lot of things about Golden Boy in recently in regards to their finances. Yeah,
Golden Boy's not him, no. I mean, at the end of the day, I think he walks... If Golden Boy folds, he's not going to walk away and, live in Sam Langford's basement.
Yeah.
So, but... At any rate, we'll get into that maybe in a different discussion, especially if he does decide to do something serious and come back here. Aside from all the fishnet stuff, I mean, you talk about a guy that, he's done some rehab, I don't mean, to put him down and stuff like that, but his main guy right now obviously is Canelo. He backs up Canelo, and he's his primary asset at Golden Boy. And not this last fight, but in one of the recent fights, he didn't even show up because he was doing a rehab. So he's still got some things, I think, to keep in, trying to get in control. But maybe he needs the structure of a training camp and things like that to get his head together or something. I don't know. Why you would call out Golovkin at this point in your career, maybe he thinks he can beat him.
I mean, when was his last fight?
It's been about 7 years. 2008, I think he lost to Pacquiao, and that was it,
He was shot back then.
Yeah, so, and the other part of it is, again, and people could call it character assassination. It's not that. We're going over facts, unfortunately, in this guy's case. And the truth is if you lived hard those 7 years, you're less likely to be able to make a comeback. You know what I mean? It's not like he's a Bernard Hopkins who seems to take care of himself. But we're getting off the subject of Sugar Ray Robinson and Joe Louis.
All right, Joe Louis.
So we got Joe Louis leaving here, and Joe's one of those guys that I think the arguments for him, you've got the 12-year run, you've got the longest or most consecutive title defenses, and all that stuff puts him up there into the conversations. But at some point, he starts to digress to Sugar Ray Robinson and some of the other fighters in the best of all time discussion. So I think right around here, an exit for Joe Louis in the round of 8 is right about where I kind of expected him to go. And obviously, I don't know, but
I think a different placement in the tournament, I think he could have won one more round.
Sure, absolutely. But that goes to say, for most of these guys, I'd be interested to see what would have happened if we had matched them little, like Pep and Duran and stuff. But we'll look at that. So let's talk about what we want to see here. We got Willie Pep. Then you've got Ezra Charles, and you've got Muhammad Ali, and you've got Sugar Ray Robinson. So how do we match this up? This is crazy. To me, I always felt this way. I watched Sugar Ray Robinson box, and one of the impressions I had in my head, and I'm not trying to belittle anybody or anything, but one of the impressions in watching Muhammad Ali and looking at him is, Muhammad Ali, especially for a heavyweight, does a pretty amazing imitation of Sugar Ray Robinson in his early years, in the 60s and stuff, when he was really moving and really using his jab and stuff like that, and he was coming up. He did a great imitation of him, and maybe that's the fight that we do. Put them in together. That would eliminate one of them from, early. Granted, they could meet in the finals if we go in another direction matchmaking, And what that would do is that might leave us with Ezra Charles facing Willie Pep, which, with the balancing act of the pound for pound, isn't going to be a mismatch at all. And, what are your thoughts? Any other ideas on the matchmaking?
Well, I cannot wait, because from what I understand, that the talk and shoot world title is being casted out of gold, diamonds, and various other, precious stones.
Yeah, if you could roll over and get at the teeth of the people with you, you could send me some gold so that I can cast this belt.
That's what I'm excited to see, the unveiling of the belt. And from what I understand, I talked to my local IRS agent, and he explained to me that this whole Joe Louis fight was to help pay back some of that debt as well that was still owed.
So
even after death.
Yeah, it's a better thing that Joe doesn't have this valuable belt then. I promise you the best radio belt that you will ever see.
Right.
Looking forward to seeing it.
Anyway, let's say goodbye to Joe Louis and then try to wrap this up. Or did we say goodbye to Joe?
We have not yet.
Okay.
Affectionately known as the Brown Bomber, he carried a record of 66 wins, 3 losses, 0 draws, and 1 no contest. Known as an honest, hardworking fighter at a time when the sport was wallowing in a cloud of gambling interests, this man held the world title for 140 consecutive months. He was also a person that Muhammad Ali went on to say was one of the greatest influences of his childhood. In his 27 title defenses, he knocked out 23 opponents that included 5 world champions. Joe Louis, it is sad for us to bid you a farewell.
Yeah, no, incredible career, incredible everything around the guy.
Inside and outside of the ring. I mean, that guy's an American hero.
Yeah, that's the part of the crossover with him is, and I think one of the reasons why he'll always remain in the discussion, because I don't think people my age and younger and stuff can grasp what it meant to, go beat a German in Germany, in Hitler's Germany, no less. You know what I mean? And the pressure of having to behave, the stories that I've read are things like when management was bringing him to light, they made sure they never photographed him with like white women or, in certain situations and stuff that could be considered controversial. Just like molding. One of the guys that, avoiding the Jack Johnson syndrome, they cast him as completely the difference. And there had been 20-something years where basically no black fighter had gotten a chance at the belt because of Johnson and his behavior and because of the negative reaction of society and stuff. So, yeah, he's doing all this, if I'm not mistaken, and starting to come up pretty much before Jackie Robinson broke the race barrier in baseball, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about a guy that was making history, and beyond, just what he was doing in the ring. And I think that, to me, that always carries a measure of respect. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about boxing is that the depth of the stories, when you really get into them, if you really wanted to get into some of this history, so the guys, like a Joe Louis, if you're young and haven't read on that stuff, I think you'll find more than enough material and information about them to really recognize an American hero or a sports hero worldwide.
You know what? I'm always interested in when Max Schmeling beat him the first time. I can't imagine what the propaganda was like in Germany. Those are the newspapers I'd like to see translated.
I agree with you completely. I've got
it's got to be the exact same thing that we experienced when he beat Max Schmeling.
Yeah, I've got newspapers from. I don't know. I know I have newspapers from that era, but I don't know if they're German. Well, we'll have to look. It's funny, you reminded me because it's World War II. I'm just thinking in my head, I have a whole bunch of newspapers I haven't been through where the headlines are actually, I have to look through them to find boxing material. And the headlines are about dropping the A-bomb on Japan. So it's just it's like the newspaper, to me, I would sit and read that part too, just for interest's sake. Fascinating stuff. But I find that those achievements of Joe Louis, to me, are bigger, and those are his biggest moments than the 12 years and the 204, the 25 defenses and that sort of stuff. Because when you perform under that kind of scrutiny and under that kind of pressure, you're a special person. There are a lot of people who wouldn't have been able to handle that type of pressure, and I think you got to be. The type of man that they describe Joe Louis as in order to live through that.
Well, that might have been the first, boxing match that the entire world had a vested interest in.
Yeah, and when we're talking about Sugar Ray, who's the man that beat him now, Sugar Ray, there's a lot of things about what we said about Joe Louis that apply to Sugar Ray as well. Because he was great and because he was recognized as great, he carried himself with a little bit of a different demeanor than Joe Louis. Joe Louis was a little bit more of the subservient athlete, trying to change and mold himself to an image, as things transitioned in history, Sugar Ray Robinson did have a little more of that, arrogance, if you want to call it that, or that more of the presence. That he didn't really care if he pissed off white America that much. And in terms of that, actually, he wouldn't play ball with the mob either. He was another guy that actually rose above some of that stuff and got away with it. Obviously, there's stories and things where he got entangled. Based in New York, you couldn't avoid it in that era. But he carried himself, remarkably well. And with confidence, and he was one of those guys who was also a crossover superstar. When you consider stories and things like that, I just love the stories that you can't beat a story where he spent a year in Paris or time in Paris. He had retired from boxing to do a tap dancing show. It's like, okay, tap dancing maybe isn't cool anymore. You know what I mean? But it probably was pretty freaking cool back then. You know what I mean? It's the same thing as people do rap albums. That's exactly what he was doing. He was doing.
Klitschko, from my understanding, just enrolled in a mime school. I don't know if you guys are aware of that or not.
Oh, but he's been miming now for 20 years in the ring.
Yeah, I saw him pretend like he was trapped inside a box.
Nice. But that's the thing is you gotta take it in context and some comparison because. Doing his tap dancing show and doing all this other variety stuff, people came to see him because he was Sugar Ray Leonard. But then when the novelty wore off, Sugar Ray Robinson. But when the novelty wore off, he had to go back to boxing, and he was a guy at that point, especially after he had killed an opponent. I don't think boxing was actually his number one thing. He wanted to be an entertainer. He loved talking to, now we're talking about a lifestyle, a guy who really crossed over to be a celebrity. Talking about writers of the era and the musicians of the era, the jazz musicians, that we're all building up a black culture, that's expanded greatly now.
Sugar Ray crossover, though. Miguel, back then, this is a guy looking. He was forward thinking, knowing that his boxing career would eventually end, and he's sitting there thinking to himself, well, how do I either reinvent myself as a person, in order to kind of cross over and extend my career, in the public eye, and he went the tap dancing route, which is that was the era of vaudeville.
Well, I think it goes more beyond that. I think he was a guy who lived a lot more in the moment, from my impressions and the books I've read and stuff. The idea of going to Paris, he took like 30 friends with him. He had to bring his pink Cadillac. Do you really? Is that cool? That's like the kind of that's like we make fun of Michael Jackson for building a Ferris wheel, but it's as eccentric in the 40s to pack your Cadillac on a boat, to take it so you can swing around in Paris, and obviously it made him a star in Paris, So it was that. It's the ability of the athlete to cross over into the mainstream, where society in Paris and people drinking tea were talking about him, and that sort of stuff. So Robinson is another one of those crossover guys that was a big star, and I think he also made the mistake and the folly of a lot of athletes nowadays, which is he had a friend, so he bought his friend a barber shop. And the guy's a barber, until the barber shop closes down, then the guy's just another hanger-on and stuff. But I know he had a barber shop. I know he had a nightclub and stuff where obviously the employees and everybody like that. I think Sugar Ray Robinson was a guy who liked to take care of people. And when he was at his peak, he rolled hard. His entourage in Paris included a dwarf, and I find that outstanding. Anytime you can bring a dwarf with you,
Miguel, I've been to one of your after parties if you were working for Bodog. I think
there were dwarves.
One of your entourage also may have included a dwarf in the past as well.
Yeah, I didn't bring the dwarf, and he wasn't with me, but the party included dwarves. I will admit that.
That's true. It's not a lie. That is not shtick. That is absolutely
No. If you need the description in full is that there were two dwarves in diapers in a tiny ring simulating boxing, and that's the absolute fact.
Dave, you really missed out when Miguel was in control of Bodog. It was fantastic.
It was,
that's going to be. I should interview you, Miguel, in regards to our Bodog days.
Yeah, I'll tell you another funny story I had with one of the girl fighters who's out there now, Julie Kedzie, on the MMA side. I think Julie has been doing more
broadcasting. Jackson now.
Yeah, I was going to say that, and she's been doing more broadcasting stuff, but she's been training more than fighting. But anyway, I remember, and she's a bright girl, and I just remember sitting at this party and just looking around, and just it was thrown by our Russian cohorts, and the Russians are very eccentric, and Calvin of Bodog was also a guy that wasn't shy about throwing a party, so it was very, very eccentric party with and I just remember looking at her and my silly sense of humor. I was like, I'm really disappointed in the party, and she's like, what? And I was like, there are no amputees. It's like there should be amputees, like just hopping in a corner too. It's
terrible.
It's what I thought of. I'm sorry, but anyway.
I think another future podcast that we could do is, avenues of business or celebrity that boxers or fighters try to go down. Joe Louis tap dancing.
No, but Sugar Ray.
Oh, Sugar Ray. I found Sugar Ray tap dancing. There's numerous other examples we could give. Roberto Duran's salsa.
Yeah, Joe Frazier released some albums. I was going to say that's one of the things I started.
Muhammad Ali did like a rap album, like cracking the Libertyville.
When I started talking about the polka, when I started talking about the polka music, I was thinking that maybe I should replace it with like Joe Frazier's "The Harder They Come" or something like that. I digress. Let's wrap this up here, and yeah, we can definitely do podcasts on some different subjects as well that I think we can get into. But yeah, some of those things, are best left behind. I'd rather look forward to some of this stuff.
Non-boxing moment featuring a fighter.
But talking about stuff on the crossover, we could dedicate one, and I know Palmer would be game on this too. But we could dedicate an entire one to boxers that did pro wrestling in the old days. Including Joe Louis and
Freddie Blassie.
Freddie Blassie would be in the conversation. I don't know, but so let's leave it with this here. So are we okay, or does anybody else want to change some of the matches up? Do we want to do Muhammad Ali versus Sugar Ray, and then that leaves us with Ezzard Charles facing Willie Pep?
I think Ali and Robinson is a great matchup, and
I think they should be on opposite sides of the bracket, though.
See, that puts them in the finals, but I think my matchmaking theory, I'm gonna trump you on this one, Mike. We'll do another one the standard way, but we started at the beginning throwing Moore and Charles together, and a couple of the fights that we wanted to see right off the bat, and I want to stick with that theory here. And what it'll do is it sends us into the final with a guy, either Pep or Ezzard Charles, who obviously deserves to be there because he's worked his way through, but who I think is going to be a surprise, and I'd rather have that X factor in the mix.
I agree, and I want to see who wins that fight anyway.
Okay.
With Charles and Pep.
Let's go ahead, Dave. I want to ask a little bit about your capabilities here. You got the matchups there. We're going to do Pep and Charles, and then we're going to do Ali and Robinson. Once we run that and we talk about it, well, I guess you could have it all run in advance anyway. But I'd like to talk about it. The point is for the next podcast, I'd like to do the final as well, so that we're not dragging this out too long.
All right.
Okay. Anyway, I think we had another great podcast. Incredible results. I don't think anybody could have told me before we looked at this and opened the file that this tournament would now be without Henry Armstrong and Sam Langford at the same time gone. With other guys, Joe Louis gone, Roberto Duran gone. So just fascinating.
Yeah, on the next podcast, I'll have actual quotes from these fighters in regards to the fights that we're talking about.
Mike.
Right, I can do a lot of research.
Mike, I got to pay editors, you know that.
Right. Sounds good. Miguel, always a pleasure. Dave, always excited to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, terrific. Dave, thanks so much, man. A great discussion, great tournament, and I think we're doing a good thing here. I think people are starting to take a look at it, and hopefully next week we can get into the finals right off the bat.
Sounds good. Excellent. Take care, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.